All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 126 of Blowback Exposing Imperial Decline. I'm Billy Bob on the West Coast. It's about 9 a.m. here. And I have two special guests, Greg Rosen from Chicago, Illinois. And I believe it's about 11 a.m. there, a little past 11. We're getting a late start. Patrick Corbett is joining us from Vancouver, Canada. And it's about, same time zone as me. So I think it's about 9:13 over there as well. This morning, we entitled our program, The Ideology of Empire. And we were hoping to discuss, topics such as that, ideology and how ideology is used by the empire to, manufacture consent for the things that they want to do. And so, I write a lot about ideology. I think a lot about ideology, and there's definitely an ideological struggle that takes place. For me, you can't really understand ideology unless you, or really what's going on at all, unless you embrace the concept of class. And so, I wrote a thing, and I'm going to read it. It's very short, and then maybe we can get some discussion on that. So I said it's 100% the West, and the West only, that is choosing confrontation over cooperation. The only rational way to comprehend this reality is through the Marxist lens that understands the class divide and the fact that the West is an oligarchy pursuing the interests of the billionaire class against the oppositional interests of the masses. There is literally no other rational way to understand geopolitical reality. So, I mean, that's an assertion, it's an opinion. But I know you guys are going to agree with that opinion, but, you want to talk about the centrality, like the primacy of understanding the concept of class when we try and explain to people what's going on, and when we're trying to understand things. Is it, how can you do that without understanding the concept of class? Any thoughts?
I personally agree with you. I think that I don't think you can understand it without understanding class. And I think that the attack on Marxist thought has been very deliberately to take the working class and subdivide them into as many different and we've seen such a great amount of that lately with the whole sexual divisions and style divisions, and trying to put people in smaller and smaller boxes. And it's not rocket science. It comes down to the same old tactic of divide and conquer. That sounds like a terrible cliche now, but it's just true.
Can I, before I let Greg make a point, I want to make another point. And for generations, we have been inundated with an anti-collectivist ideology, right? In the West, collectivism is synonymous with genocide and mass incarceration and mass murder. And liberalism, it's the individual that is the most important thing. And individualism trumps collectivism. Collectivism is evil, and individualism is what needs to be promoted and embraced. But whose interests does that serve? I mean, is that like you said, when everybody is reduced to an individual and we don't have any unity within the collective, like how can we ever hope to make positive change or do anything that improves, the status quo. So basically, liberalism just seems, liberalism is the ideology, and there's many, branches of liberalism. It's the ideology of individualism that really, is great for the ruling class because it ensures that we'll never, join forces and form a collective that's powerful enough to overcome their system. And again, and that's why they shove this anti-collectivism down our throats, because they fear that and they don't want that. Greg, I'll let you get it. Sorry about
Well,
that.
I've been focused
Yeah.
a lot on the Middle East, where divide and conquer is certainly the operational principle, right, for 100 plus years. And thinking about in Syria, where the new government is, their first announcement was they now are having a free market economy. And the U.S. is preoccupied to see if they put in democracy, right? Our two ideological pillars of evaluating foreign government.
Well, yeah. So, that'll make it very easy to sell to the masses, the Western masses, right? Like if they can brand them as democratic and free market, like that's going to be great. And and that's what this is. It's branding, and they've indoctrinated us in a certain way, and then they know how to appeal to that indoctrination with the right branding, the right advertising, and that's definitely a way of thinking about these things. It's all just branding. It's narratives and it's branding, and it's hey, let's figure out what polls good, and then we'll say that, and we'll use that to sell our wars of conquest, our genocides, etc., etc.
Well, and we had never discussed that. I mean, not us, but in the bigger picture, that Syria is, a non-Marxist socialist state. That was, all we heard was dictatorship and human rights abuse.
Yeah, and it's the same way. Go ahead, Patrick.
I was just going to say, it's interesting bringing Syria into the ideological discussion, because when I was first educated on Syria by people like Eva Karine Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley, and found out the kinds of propaganda that were being used against the Syrian government. Things as simple as calling it the Assad regime and that type of thing, and portraying him as a dictator. I had a lot of wrestling to do with my own class consciousness, because I came to admire both the culture and the ideological positioning of Syria in the context of the Middle East, with a considerable amount of some progressive ideas, for instance, like in Iraq, but some rather brutal enforcement of other aspects of the government. And so I found myself wrestling with the idea of how to position my own attitude towards a government in Syria that still was, in quotes, liberal government, and that still was very much a class state. It's been instructive, and of course, what the United States disliked about Syria was its independence, its embrace somewhat of collectivist ideas, So it makes, in order to be on side with the hegemon, you have to subscribe to the hegemon, you know. And it's interesting that they came up with the people had to abide by a rules-based system, and we make up the rules. In other words,
Right.
the ideology is ours.
Right.
Yeah, the rules-based system is yeah, it's amorphous. It's always changing. It's whatever the U.S. says it is. So there was a lot of reasons that Syria was, on the naughty list, on the U.S. naughty list. I mean, their support for the Palestinians, their refusal to accept Israel, and to, they were part of the resistance, even though they didn't resist too much.
Lately.
Right. Yeah. They resisted for a while. The overthrow of Assad held on to power for a while, but he was a British trained ophthalmologist, right? He was an eye doctor that went to school in Britain. He was very westernized. He was never groomed for political power. He was never thinking that he was going to be a leader of Syria. But when his brother died, he was kind of forced into it. And the U.S., thought that they could, work with him. And he showed some resolve. He showed some integrity, and he demonstrated that he didn't, he wasn't going to just be a, who's that clown in Jordan? King, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Is it Abdullah? Or anyway, so he wasn't a puppet. Like he wasn't going to be a puppet, but he did try and, be nice. He didn't want to upset them for no reason. And I think, you hear all the things about how he was a torturer because the United States renditioned somebody over to him, and he did try and get information from him at the behest of the United States. And of course, the United States uses this to accuse him of torture. But that was something that he was doing to try and get along and to not antagonize the United States. But it didn't help. It didn't save him in the end.
I mean, I assume there was some level of police state there, right? I mean, they've been a target of U.S. imperialism since 1949, one of the longest standing targets. I mean, I think we had our first coup there in 1949, and it was to build a pipeline. And then we couped there again when they joined with Egypt a couple of times, or attempted. And then pretty much nonstop since the 80s, with a little break in for negotiations. In the 90s, they've been under economic sanctions and different regime change operations. So having a police state is the only way they're going to survive that.
Yeah. When did his Assad's father come to power? Do you know?
I think
early
1970.
1950s, I think.
No, not Assad hadn't been there that long, I don't think.
So yeah, his dad in a military coup, Hafez Assad, came to power. 70s probably.
Yeah, I think.
But was it that late? Oh, okay.
But I'm not certain.
They were Soviet aligned starting in the 50s, so they were, in that same kind of general governance.
So just as the United States, tries to sell us on this new regime with words like democratic and free market, they also, try and turn us against those people by using words like regime and human rights violator and dictator. And I mean, this is all just the kinds of branding that goes on to condition people's minds and to influence, public opinion. So I'm kind of pulling us back into the ideological discussion. But we can go. We could definitely continue with current events. But I mean, so it's like, normal people, normies that are just not really politically inclined and just, live their lives, and they just kind of passively absorb the indoctrination, right? And so they think that the U.S. is good. We don't do a lot of good things. I mean, we do some bad things, but by and large, we're a force for good, and we're way better than those countries that we hate, that we want to attack. We're way better than China and Russia. Like this mindset. So what is the most interesting and stimulating thing to me is trying to think about how we can get this mindset to wake up and, kind of figure out what's going on. And I think part of the problem is most of these people, they're too busy and it's too daunting. When they think about, well, I think I have an idea of what's going on, but I really am not going to spend too much time because, like, how do I even know who to believe? And it's just like there's this hopeless sense of I can never really figure things out anyway. Plus, I don't have the time. I got to get to work. So this is how they keep people, disenfranchised from reality, and it serves their interest. But that's what's interesting to me is like, how can we present things to people and get them, get them waking up and in tune with what is going on. But yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question. If I knew how to do that, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be here right now.
Well, I think people have an innate sense that can be worked from, because they do understand that a great deal of wealth equates to social and political control. So they use language that's close to, but unfortunately not close enough to Marxist language to get people into an understanding mode. So they call them oligarchs, or they even go so far as to say it's casino capitalism or stuff like this, in order to avoid confronting the actual language which tells you what the financial and political ramifications of people's material position in the society. It gives you that information. And it's interesting because I'm way older than you guys. And when I was at university, we had Marxist professors. I mean, imagine that. I'm not saying they all were. Some people thought they all were, but, and some of them, their Marxism was a little frayed around the edges. But, it's been one of the chores of the propaganda arm of the ruling class to destroy the language of Marxism, which would give you that information.
Yeah, they destroy the language
too.
Say that again, Greg?
No, I was just thinking the word crony capitalism too is a obscuring term.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think one of the things. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think one of the things we need to do is reinstate that. And by the way, I want to compliment you, Billy, on the sort of Marxism 101 posts you've been making periodically on Facebook. They're really well, simply but profoundly simply, like saying it in a good sense, way for people to understand where Marxists are coming from. And I'd even thought at times when I was reading them, you should expand you're writing in that area and possibly collect it as a short, or even if you feel up to it, a long book.
Oh, I appreciate that compliment. And I mean, I think I don't see a lot of people kind of doing what I'm doing, but I'm kind of vulgarizing. I'm really making it very simple. And so to me, I mean, I appreciate your appreciation, but it just seems that is, I mean, it's what needs to be said from my point of view. And so that's, I'm saying what I think needs to be said. I'm doing the best I can at that. So I do appreciate that. And I learn so much from interacting with others, reading other people's approaches as other people say what they think needs to be said. And so, it's all about, learning and fine tuning and just sharing what the totality of your understanding at this point. And so I'm almost half century old. And, there's a lot younger people with a lot more knowledge and a lot better grasp of reality than me. And so, I definitely am humble. I take pride in my humility. And that's kind of a joke. That's a contradiction, pride of my humility. But yeah, it's I just think everybody has, a contribution to make. And I learned so much from listening to others as they do what I do and say what they think needs to be said. And I think, we just need more of that. And we do need to start waking people up. And I think we are waking people up. I think, the political reality is becoming apparent to people, more apparent with, the reality of oligarchy, the reality of class. And I think if it's right there and it's so obvious. And I think that we can explain this to people. But, they have this indoctrination. They have these things in their minds, anti-collectivist, anti-Marxist, anti-socialist, as well as pro-capitalist sentiment. So they want to make sense of things in a way that vindicates capital. They don't want capitalism to be the problem. How could capitalism be the problem? Or they want to make sense of things, but they can't question the fact that communism is bad. Like, so they look at things and they have to come up with an explanation and an understanding within these parameters. And the parameters are hard set in their minds. And the parameters are capitalism is good, socialism is bad. And given those parameters, how do we make sense of things? And it's a fool's errand. But that's the beauty of indoctrination from the perspective of the oligarchs, because once they've hardwired people's brains and fit them within these real tight parameters, they're never going to be able to figure shit out. So part of what I'm saying is, hey guys, socialism actually good. Actually existing socialist countries, actually we're on the good side. Capitalism is bad, and it's tough. It's tough for people to comprehend that. But it's the only way that you can make sense of things. Anyway, sorry for grandstanding again.
No, that's good. I think, I mean, it's multifaceted. There's so many areas of attack. One of the things that I and quite often when I'm reading somebody's post and I see that they're well motivated, they're quote good people, and they don't want to see people tortured or bombed, like the way the Israelis treat the Palestinians and things like that. But they don't have much of the knowledge base, which, taking a cue from Orwell, has been stuffed down the memory hole. And so you get people saying things like, I can't believe my country's doing that. Well, why can't you? Because they had slaves and they murdered most of their indigenous population. So what do you suggest has changed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I mean, and it's like they're coming at it with the the implication that it's something strange or new, right, that we're doing bad things. And again, and that's just the indoctrination, talking, the one we've all grown up with in the West, from cradle to grave, in our schools, where we're pledging allegiance to the flag, where we're learning about how great and free our country is. Like, it's just that indoctrination talking, and it's totally detached from objective reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the struggle that we have to figure out how to deal with when we're trying to get people to wake up.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, as I gradually got a handle on our history, I used to kind of, like, as out there, imagine things went bad at some point. Maybe it was Vietnam, right? You could figure out some point, but if you study history, like you're saying, Patrick, it goes all the way back to, the colonials arriving.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So, I mean,
Now,
even Trump tapped into that, right? Make America great again.
yeah.
As if we had it together at some point and then went bad,
Yeah.
became imperialists and had all this inequality and corruption.
So, I mean, I would say I would say two things. I'm gonna probably forget the second. So the first thing is, we have progressed, right? So definitely capitalism was progress over feudalism, and the oligarchy, that is, in my opinion, synonymous with liberal democracy, and it's synonymous with capitalism, and what replaced feudalism was better than what had existed prior. And we have seen progress, especially with racial equality, um, things like that. So, but if we think of it in terms of oligarchy versus the interests of the masses of people, the working class, I mean, how do we continue progress? Like, are we at the apex? Like, is it impossible to progress any further? Have we arrived? Is this it? Or is there progress in thinking in terms of the hereditary monarchy and that existed with the in league with the church, that comprised the feudal system? Sure, it improved when the oligarchy took over and started preaching liberalism and individual rights and human rights. Now, they preached that, they didn't really believe it, and it's still just an oligarchy. So what's the next step? Well, the next step is actual democracy. The next step is a government of, by, and for the masses of the people, instead of a government of, by, and for the the wealthy elites. And so that's one of the basic things I think anybody can understand. And I'm always repeating that over and over again in my posts. But I think that's the rational way to view things. And if we're thinking in terms of progress, there's a lot of progress that we have to go. Everybody can look around and see that we have problems. And if you understand those problems are related to and caused by oligarchy, right? It's caused by the wealthy elite pursuing their own interests, and often their own interests are in opposition to the interests of the vast majority. So, like my post that I read earlier this morning, it's the United States that refuses to cooperate with China and Russia. China and Russia want nothing more than to cooperate and to have peace through mutual prosperity, and work on tackle the biggest issues that are facing our planet. Underdevelopment, climate change, poverty. Like, Russia and China would love nothing more than to cooperate with the United States in a non-ideological way, and just work on tackling the Earth's biggest problem. But it's the United States that refuses. It's the United States alone. It's the oligarchy. It's the Western oligarchy thinking, no. We can't let these powers rival us. We can't allow these societies to challenge us politically or economically. And we have to maintain our hegemony, so we must attack them. So it's the confrontation versus cooperation, and it's being driven by the interests of the oligarchy against what is the interest of the masses of us regular people? We want peace and mutual prosperity. We want good relations with Russia and China.
Yeah, and I think that Russia and China, if you could put it in the vernacular, would say, "We just want you to get out of our effing way," you know, because we can do it fine on our own. We don't need you, and I just want to mention one thing I came across yesterday, just as a guidepost to. Well, I'll mention a couple of things. One is when the West told China, "No, sorry, you can't come to our space station," China built their own, and that is extraordinary. I mean, the U.S. cannot build a space station now. They're not the architects of the space station. But that wasn't the thing I saw. What I saw was the Chinese are now in the process of testing a 4 Mach, 4 times the speed of sound passenger plane.
Yeah, I saw that.
Now what do you need to say about Chinese technology? You can't. You got to stop accusing them of stealing it from the West, because another thing they're in testing and about to implement is maglev rail technology, which will make trains damn near as fast as planes. I mean, and it's part of the ideology of the West that blocks that knowledge of China. If I talk to people and they think China is still a country full of ignorant peasants. They do pretty well for ignorant peasants.
I wonder how fast the Concorde flew. The Concorde was a passenger jet for
Mach
the
2.
elite. It was only
Mach
Mach 2.
2.
So
Yep.
China's doubled that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we all know about the high-speed rail and that technology. No, China's, I mean, and we tried to cut them off from processors, from chips and conductors. So now they're just going to make their own, and they're going to make them way better. So, yeah, I've been convinced for years that China is unstoppable. There's no military or political or economic approach that can stop China, and they are the future. And it's just great. Like thank goodness for humanity, and the fact that it's a communist party that is has had such great success really says a lot about the power of ideology and the power that Marxism has, in understanding reality and allowing you to formulate a plan to improve reality. Like that's what it's about. And it's interesting talking to people, because some people are, like you said, Patrick, they're gonna say, "Oh, China, they're poor and backwards," right? But even the ones that know China is doing well, although they probably deny the extent to which how well they are doing, what do they want to do? They want to say, "Well, yeah, that's because they're capitalist," right? So they say that China's doing good, but that's because they're capitalists now.
Oh yeah.
That's what they say. And so, and I'm like, if we want, I could embrace Chinese capitalism. If we could be capitalists like China, put a communist party in power, nationalize the banks, nationalize the biggest industries, and have everybody, including the private industries, work together towards 5-year economic plans put out by the Communist Party. That's the kind of capitalism I approve of, and we should do more of that.
Yeah, and it falls into line with Marxist thinking. Marx, or specifically Marxist-Leninist, never said that once the revolution comes, everything is going to be communized. It's not. They said they actually predicted more like 200 or 300 years. But it's interesting because Western drive for hegemony actually drives a communist country like China further and faster. There's an example of blowback for you.
Yeah, no, it's like NVIDIA is about to collapse. NVIDIA, I think, is I think it's a US corporation, and it's about to collapse because they can't sell their chips to China anymore. And that was their biggest market. And so that's right there is the blowback. You touched on, Patrick, a very important point that, we could explore. And so, there's Western Marxists. So when we're talking about, what happens after the revolution, you've got Western Marxists. So there's a whole brand of people who identify with Marx, identify with the left, that say China is capitalist too. And that's because, in my opinion, they have a complete misunderstanding about Marxism, and they think it's some kind of a dogma, some kind of a blueprint where you abolish, the private ownership of the means of production immediately after taking political power, regardless of how that act affects your government, the workers, etc. So it's that silly Western dogma. So people have been indoctrinated about what Marxism is. So even people that embrace Marxism and call themselves Marxists have been indoctrinated with a misunderstanding, in my opinion, of what Marxism is. And so that's another thing that we're having to deal with, because you have, a lot of supposed allies that, trash China and echo all the Western slurs against them, but still claim to be leftists and even Marxists. And so that's another challenge that we have. And I think that's due to indoctrination. And then you have the people on the right, the people that embrace the idea of capitalism. They think capitalism is good in their mind, but they think that they don't know what socialism is, how we understand it. They don't understand Marxism how we understand it. They assume that Marxism is the immediate abolition of private property once you take political power. It's this dogma. And so they're the ones that also say that China is not socialist or China isn't Marxist, because China continues to, allow private ownership of the means of production. But there's this misunderstanding, and it causes people to, it detaches them from the reality, and it gets them to advocate against, the best interest of their own best interest.
Yeah, and one of the key examples of that in the present historical reality is the party control of the financial system. That is a very big one right there, and because they're not saddled with having to take huge amounts of profit out for individuals.
No, that's the superiority. It's the superiority of socialism with Chinese characteristics. And so I always say that, it's not a dogma, right? What's the opposite of dogmatic? It's pragmatic. So Marxism is pragmatic, and it looks at the existing material conditions, and it decides what is in the best interest of the vast majority. And so, under Mao's China, for instance, they realized that it would be in the best interest of the vast majority to have free trade and investment from the West, to access Western markets, to access Western foreign investment, direct foreign investment. And Cuba is the same way. Cuba wants the embargo to end. They want to do business. And North Korea is the same way. They're not glad that they're being sanctioned, that they're being embargoed. No, they want the right to trade with people, and it's the U.S. that is, keeping them from doing that. But this is all lost on the morons that you find on social media who have political opinions, of the kind that, the typical kind of indoctrination that we all have been afflicted with. It doesn't make sense, and yet, they embrace it. So they're like, on the one hand, they say, no, Cuba's or North Korea is really communist because they don't, they don't trade with anybody. But China is capitalist because they trade, and they don't even realize that this is stupid because it's the West that is dictating who trades and who doesn't. They all want to trade. But given the embargo, well, that country is going to do the best they can. They're gonna implement policies of self-sufficiency like China did before the embargo was lifted, and like Cuba continues to do, like North Korea continues to do. But trade is definitely something that all Marxists ought to embrace and understand is necessary. So it's not anti-Marxist. Go ahead.
I think you're conflating a little bit trade and capitalism, because even the Soviet Union, when everything was nationalized, still engaged in trade and wanted to. Right?
Yeah, no, there's complexity. So, while large industries, I don't think there was any, real large privately owned industries in the Soviet Union, but there was small business. Small businesses, small private owned businesses that have existed, in all countries, and they currently exist in North Korea. But yeah, large national industries, privately owned, those were pretty much nationalized. Whereas under China, there's large industries like Huawei that are privately owned. Now, Huawei is owned by a member of the Communist Party, and he has said, when the interests of my business and the interests of the Communist Party conflict, my business is going to do what the Communist Party says. And so, in that way, the private owners in China are subordinate to the government, whereas in the West, it's the big businesses that really control the government and direct the government, and it's the opposite in China. But no, these are topics that need to be dissected and discussed, and everybody ought to have a full, complete, satisfactory understanding of them, because this is, we're talking about reality. We're describing reality, and you can't really understand reality without the understanding this class dynamic. Understanding, that owners often have, interests, political interests, economic interests that are oppositional to the working class, and this plays out in the struggle to control the politics, control the government, and the economic policy, every kind of policy, domestic policy, foreign policy.
So if people are attracted to Marxism because they see capitalism and imperialism wreaking havoc and creating poverty and pollution, and then when they see you saying, well, we can have communism, but it's really capitalism that's just better regulated, I don't think that has the appeal, is overthrowing capitalism for people. I think it's important to be able to talk about China and what it is and isn't, but I don't think it's a good selling point to say you can still have capitalism. We just got, better behaved capitalists, or they get executed.
Well, yeah, no. So we were here like last week. We were having this discussion, and yeah, there was more. I definitely wanted to, there was more to say. There was definitely more to say. It's tough because I think the way to sell socialism correctly is to say that it's first and foremost about political power. And after that, it's about identifying which policies are going to be in the best interest of people. And there's no dogma for that. And like we've seen in China, sometimes the best economic policy is to, like Mao said, use capitalism as temporarily, not in perpetuity. But if the material conditions are such that capitalism is going to improve things better, quicker, develop productive forces, raise living standards, increase quality of life, even in an imperfect way, because you're in a capitalist world, right? You have to survive in a capitalist world. You know, everybody else is capitalist, and so you have to capitalism too, or you're going to be, you know, North Korea or Cuba, and those are
or your
great countries.
Stalin's USSR. I mean,
Well,
right.
but again,
We
the
do have another
USSR.
example of powerful economic growth and development.
Well, but it's different because the USSR was like, you know, nearly half the planet with China, you know, and now if it's just, you know, so it's smaller. So I'm saying so the USSR, it was just much bigger, a bigger percentage of humanity and a bigger percentage of the planet. And so those material conditions were just objectively different than what China was facing. And so I fully believe that, you know, had there not been a Sino-Soviet split, had, you know, Stalin not been murdered probably by Khrushchev and his gang, you know, that they probably could have done better without embracing capitalism. But because all those things happened, the material conditions existed that necessitated, you know, an embrace of capitalism. And you know, it's really because World War II resulted in the United States accounting for half the global economy and 5% of the population. So that huge economic power, you know, if that power is against you, you're going to suffer, and if they're willing to work with you, you're gonna benefit. Just
yeah, I mean, I think that's a better framing to say under the conditions they were in. Yeah. This was an adaptive strategy.
Okay. No, and I wanted to make that clear because I was afraid I was maybe giving you and others incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, similar to the Soviet Union, right? When it was destroyed after World War I in the Civil War and embargoed, it used that strategy, but for shorter.
The NEP?
Yeah.
Patrick, we hope we're not boring you.
No, I'm not. I'm stacking up points to make. But no, this is what I like to do because I don't know. It just political analysis and understanding realities as opposed to simply ideologies. Some ideologies are based on realities. Some of them are distortions of realities. And one, I mean, to which I frequently in my own mind, you know, there's so few people I have to talk about it because there are some people who are politically active in the sense of meeting and discussions and things like that. I just don't have access to that now to the extent I would like. And I'm also concerned about, you were saying about the progress we make. I think the greatest progress we made and could have come out better was in the 30s when people were really up against hard times, and there were people who were understanding the class nature of what was going on, and they didn't have a very powerful communist party, but they at least did have a communist party, and they did have you know, some thinkers and activists. And then the next period, I mean, I actually, here's a question for you. I have an idea that I would like to tackle a book that I tentatively called Blackout. And my thesis in wanting to write this is that I think there was a revolutionary opportunity within the Black movement, the Black Panthers, and the mobilization, the huge mobilization of uh, uh, black people in, the March on Washington and things like that. There was an incredible growth of political awareness then, and I think it could have led. I think except for racism, which is a big except for, the Black Panther Party could have morphed into the Vanguard Party. But the condition of white people at that time, including white radicals, was not about to accept the kind of black leadership that they would have needed to accept. And the ruling class took the ultimate solution to that by decapitating the leadership. They killed the most popular leader, Martin Luther King. They killed literally hundreds of black leaders from the Black Panther Party, and they killed the person I think was the most likely to become the revolutionary leader, who was Fred Hampton. He was only 21, I think it was, when he was murdered, and he was already, very powerful within the black community due to what he was saying and how he was positioning himself as a Marxist leader. And I mean, I've listened to speeches of his, and I can't really criticize his understanding of Marxism.
And he was like, what was he, 21, 22?
21.
Yeah.
21.
I appreciate all that commentary, and it reminds me of Max Perry's latest article about the Uhuru 3 trial. So Max Perry, friend of the show, great Marxist, great journalist. His most recent article was at Covert Action magazine called "The Uhuru 3 Trial Was the Inevitable Outcome of Russiagate." And ever since, the Bolshevik Revolution, and Max, points to it in his article. But ever since then, they have been, black communists, black leftists have been accused of, being Russian puppets or Soviet agents. And so that just goes back a long way. But no, that's a great point. I mean, the efforts with which the establishment went to keep the power away from, to turn people away from leftism, socialism, communism, right? It kind of terrified them, especially with not JFK. Who was during World War II? FDR. FDR. Remember Henry Wallace? So Henry Wallace was going to be the president if FDR died. But if you know anything about Henry Wallace, like, his platform was tremendous. It was about peace through mutual prosperity and being friends with Russia and putting workers first. Like, it was an excellent platform. Scared the hell out of the establishment, the ruling elite. And so they rigged that primary. They rigged the Democratic convention, and they got Truman in place on the ticket, through subterfuge and all those things they're capable of doing. And then they got scared of term limits, because they don't want a popular president, just winning election after election. So they they instituted term limits, and then they went to work on unions, right? Then they went to work on, communist parties, socialist parties, and they just attacked them outright. And they've been undermining them as much as they possibly can ever since, because they felt threatened by democracy, by the masses, by this ideology that is so obvious and correct and useful in making things better. But they don't want they don't want to make things better for us. And actually, this system could not be better for themselves, right? This is the best system for them. If you are rich, that you can afford the best healthcare money can buy, you're going to get really good healthcare. You know, if you can afford the best education money can buy, you're going to get the best education. That's what they care about. They care about capital being king, and and they're going to, put in policies to benefit themselves to the detriment of everyone else. But they don't want to. They're not interested in improving the system for everyone, especially if it means that their own, wealth, power, and privilege will be negatively affected. But I had a lot of thoughts when you were talking about the Black Power movement, and but they've all escaped me now.
Well, I have one question, a serious question to ask you guys. I told you that I was interested in writing that, and the idea excites me, but without bowing to racist ideology as opposed to Marxist ideology, I think that's a story for Black people to tell. For somebody who's descended from that tradition that I can't know about through experience. And I think experience, if some son of one of the leaders from the period when they were successfully active were to arise out of that and write something. I mean, there were some great people there. It hurts to think of what kind of a leader Malcolm X could have become, considering that he went all the way from making his living as a pimp to being one of the most brilliant orators and thinkers of his time.
There was a lot of great orators and great thinkers. I mean, when I think about, the 60s and 70s, Malcolm X, yeah, tremendous, but also, I mean, so many others. And when we compare that to today, like, who do we have? My God, how successful have they been in silencing rational, thoughtful, intelligent people and replacing them with, I mean, who do we get? Candace Owens. I mean, I like her on Israel, but she's no Malcolm X. So no, they've just been so successful at keeping these great people from being able to influence our opinions and our minds of the masses, and yeah. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for us, but it's success for them. Yeah, I agree, Patrick. Like, and MLK was very young as well. I mean, obviously, Fred Hampton. I mean, and then you think about great leaders in other countries. Patrice Lumumba, and so they identify these great charismatic orators, these really thoughtful, intelligent people, and they kill them. That's what they do.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it must have been. I think it must have been incredibly frightening to them that Patrice Lumumba could have such an effect on John Kennedy, and be somebody that Kennedy looked up to, admired, and felt was such a significant political leader. I mean, to have one of their own go from being Joe Kennedy's son to being the kind of person who made that speech, which probably sealed his fate when he gave his we can work with the Soviet Union. We want peace. We don't want war. It was like, shut the fuck up. Excuse me.
Anyway. Yeah, Exactly. I'm a firm believer that that's why he had to go, because he wasn't for confrontation. He was for cooperation.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And that goes right back to your formulation for the theme for this discussion, because uh, that is people in action based on ideology. And their ideology was, this is not a hegemon, and he wants to go the wrong way, and we just can't allow that. And he's too attractive and well spoken to just, yeah, man, they couldn't even nail him with his philandering, because it didn't turn people off.
right. Yeah, Marilyn Monroe sang him happy birthday, and it kind of was good for him,
Yeah.
So your commentary, Patrick, kind of brings up Donald Trump a little bit in my mind, which might be interesting to explore, or not.
I think so.
I mean, some can say that look, depending on how Trump behaves, he could easily get the Kennedy treatment, like in my estimation. Now, I don't think it's likely that he's going to behave like that to where they would really try and give him the Kennedy treatment, but it's definitely possible. Alternatively, maybe he's given real good guarantees that it won't happen, and that's the reason he's there now. That could be true as well. But I know a lot of people kind of see Trump as anti-establishment, and that he is his whole rhetoric, that he's opposed by them and that he opposes them, and he's going to drain the swamp, and he's going to fix things, and he's going to make America great again. You guys think that's going to happen? That's kind of a joke. I know.
I think Trump has pretty well sealed the direction that he's going in his relationship with Israel. And I have a question for you. You might think it's a conspiratorial bent, but I see it just as it fascinates me, the relationship that Israel has with the United States, and I tend to think that it's based on the need for the United States to have a leave behind entity in the Middle East, so they can be there as a disruptor and things. But what I'm getting at, that you could accuse me of a conspiracy theory, and whether or not what I'm going to suggest is something that was actually formulated or not, I would have no idea. But that's the greater Israel thing. I used to just think, yeah, that's just bullshit that people like Netanyahu carry on. But as you look into the past of it and how it came about, that was an ambition of just about all the Israeli leaders, with maybe one or two exceptions, and maybe either stated or unstated, Greater Israel is something that the U.S. wants to see, because it will have its nasty fingers in so many, such a wider range, and with a lot of, I mean, look at the uh, desolation they're creating around them. Now Syria, previously Libya, and
Lebanon.
and definitely Lebanon is on the target list. So when that's complete, and the Greater Israel is complete, and not to forget that the Palestinians were sitting on in Gaza great resources in the ocean.
So, I mean, I don't know
and
if it's a conspiracy theory. Trump openly gave or tried to say the Golan Heights is part of Israel.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
we have.
So, and then the flag, the two blue lines are supposed to represent is that like the Nile and the Euphrates or something? Maybe those are
No,
both in Egypt.
I don't know that one.
But it's supposed to represent the boundaries, the two boundaries of Greater Israel, allegedly. But no, I would agree, Patrick, that that's not a conspiracy. That's that's been the goal of Zionism from the very beginning, is to
Oh, I
create
know
the
that, but what I'm talking about is from the U.S. point of view, signing on to that, saying, okay, if you stay within our parameters, which are much broader than the normal world or people, then you get what you get for your loyalty to us is the Greater Israel, because it serves our needs too.
Yeah, I mean, the less Syria, the less Jordan, the less any of them is better for us, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We're happy
yeah,
to see
exactly.
Lebanon gone, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Israel represents such a closely aligned puppet, right? Like, I mean, we would literally, be I mean, we just have so much control over their actions in a way that we don't control Saudi Arabia. Like, I mean, we do control Saudi Arabia quite a bit, but Israel, more than any other, entity, national entity in the Middle East, is it's like a 51st state, right? It's like a 51st state. So it's like if we put a 51st state and we put it right there in the Middle East, like it's us. And so yeah, we want to be as big and have big of an area, have as much control as possible over that area. And so it's symbiotic, because that's good for these whack job messianic Zionists, who are really think that God gave them that land. And then it's also good for the secular people who are just racist, people that think that, we're special and, we deserve this because fuck you. That's why. So, I mean, that describes the two groups that comprise Zionism the most, as far as actual, Jewish citizens in Israel. But yeah, it's a symbiotic, right? Like, I mean, it definitely is benefiting the interests of the United States empire, and it's definitely benefiting the interests of Zionists. Did you see these people when, they apparently captured this mountain that has snow? And so, man, these Zionists are so happy, so giddy. We just stole some more land, and I can't wait to have a snow party. We'll go snowboarding. We'll be partying all night long. And it's just the awesomest thing. It's just disgusting, because I mean, that's coming, you're killing people for that. That's not your land. You're stealing it. And you're celebrating and partying like it's totally
it's
kosher.
like a high point for 3 countries, I think, right? They can observe Lebanon and all of Syria from there.
Yeah. Am I talking? Is it what mountain is it? It's not Horeb.
Hermon.
Mount Hermon. Yeah. But no, it's just reveals and exposes the mindset that is supporting that kind of thing. And it's like there's no sense of morality or justice at all. It's just about, hey, what's in my tribe's interest? Oh, my tribe just got access to this great snow area where we can have snow parties. Awesome. I mean, that's the extent of it. It's so disgusting.
I mean, it's interesting. A lot of people have been moving from a lot of gloom about the situation to maybe it's not everything lost. Because what is Turkey's agenda? What is HTS really going to do? Are they going to go rogue? What is
Okay, so
Turkey's?
at first, when you were talking about people, I thought you were talking about Zionists, because the Zionists, of course, a lot of them have left Israel. They're unhappy and they were gloomy, and now they've got this big win and they're happy. But you were actually talking about people who are pro-Syria and who were upset that, you know, Syria fell like a house of cards. And but yeah, you're right. So that's kind of been the discussion in the echo chamber, the alternative social media echo chamber is, you know, it was bad, but it's not catastrophic. You know, Iran is still powerful, and Israel has a whole set of headaches that are different. And Assad was a little bit of an albatross. I didn't know it. I didn't understand. I didn't appreciate what kind of an albatross Syria and Assad were. But to have that freed, it's not really all bad.
And albatross to who?
Iran and Russia. Is some talk of that they were burden, that Syria had become a burden.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of sour grapes
with the sanctions. I mean, like, yeah, Professor Morandi was alluding to that a little bit. That you know, Iran was under considerable pressure themselves, economic, and they also had to help, you know, a little bit, you know, Syria. So I just didn't appreciate the extent to which Syria had been hollowed out, the extent to which those sanctions were really making that society suffer. And I thought the military was still strong and a deterrent. And you know, I think a lot of people did, and we were absolutely incorrect. But
yeah, we were incorrect because, for our part, we took our eye off the ball. I certainly did. When I left Syria, and I don't mean physically, I wasn't there, but when I left the kind of focus I had on Syria, I didn't think that they were comfortable, but I thought that they had things under control, much in the same way as they had in, you know, the mid decade thereafter. They were attacked and things, and you know, I'd occasionally see things about the Tiger Group was going to do this or that. So subsequently, hearing what they actually went through, and their inability, through no fault of their own, in my opinion, to mitigate the hollowing out process that was going on, and they weren't getting the airtime to explain that to us, and that was clearly not their priority to get the online people on side, you know. But yeah, you know, and so I think that the people who did know were the United States. I mean, they had people on the ground there. They knew the effect their sanctions were having. They were the bribers, if anybody was, in terms of bribing elements of the military to stand down. And you know, we got the result.
I'm wondering if Syria or if Turkey knew, though, that the whole thing was going to collapse.
I think they did. Yeah, maybe not so much in the beginning, but if Erdogan comes across as anything, he comes across as opportunistic. So he probably was in the loop well before it happened, and well before he made his moves.
Undoubtedly. Oh, go ahead, Greg.
One school of thought says with 30,000, you know, ragtag, lightly armed jihadis, they didn't think they were going to do more than put pressure on maybe take Aleppo. And that, like Marundi was saying, now Turkey has to subsidize Syria, which they probably wouldn't have wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know if we're going to know for sure. I'm partial to the explanation that says there was some bribery going on, and some of the
No doubt.
Syrian military agreed to stand down, and they weren't going to follow orders to resist if those orders ever came. And that money undoubtedly did come from the United States, even if it was the Mossad and Israeli operatives or Turkish operatives that were involved with that. I'm sure the Mossad was involved. But yeah, ultimately it had to have been from our Western printing press. There's no doubt about that. And yeah, did they expect to actually have to take over the whole country, or was that a surprise? That's an interesting question. And is it going to backfire on them now that they have the whole bag to hold? That's time will tell.
Right. An article that was going around a couple days ago that the U.S. needs to be prepared to start killing Turks. Did you guys see that?
Oh, that's
No, I
interesting.
didn't see it. Can you give us more?
What?
Can you give us more?
Yeah, I was saying that to defend our territory, which includes the oil, and our allies, the Kurds, who fought ISIS for us.
No, they're getting out ahead of it, Greg. They're very savvy. They're getting out ahead of it and starting to condition us to being able to do that. That's incredible. I guess it's what it's what you're going to expect. You would expect the media to start putting that condition in people's minds in case it happens.
Well, yeah, and it calls into question the conventional understanding is that Turkey would have done this only in close conjunction with us and Israel. Right.
Yeah.
That sort of brings up a question in my mind. We sort of approach it from the point of view of, they know what's going on, and they make their move when it's opportune for them. But it would seem logical that they would also use their position in the media to run flags up the pole and see what they know what their they know what their ultimate objectives are, but there may be questions in their mind as to which path to take, and they're well positioned to float stories of what might happen. I mean, Trump's a great example there. Like there's more speculation about what he might do than anything I can think of.
Yeah, and I think a lot of go ahead, Greg.
He made a comment about Turkey with an unwelcome takeover, which I think is feeding into this.
Yeah.
And so, and you think if it was all coordinated by everybody to begin with, they would have had all these questions figured out, and there wouldn't be this, confusion and this, what's going to happen next, because they would have already had agreed on the parameters. You're going to have this, you're going to have this, and then we're going to do this. So yeah, no, I think it must be a little bit more spontaneous and not all centrally orchestrated, with everybody involved. I think, there's got to be some opportunism and some spontaneity by individual actors, and that forces, their allies, so Turkey, being spontaneous, forcing Israel to respond to their actions, and we see what Israel did, very opportunistic as well. And then the U.S., it's like, but obviously, we hold a lot of leverage over Turkey, and so it'll be interesting to see how they figure that out. Ultimately, it's a bit of a headache, but I think Turkey, Israel, United States are still not unhappy about what happened. They're like, hey, these new problems, they're easier to manage than the old problems. And so we'll manage it. But there is the chance that, stuff could go sideways, and you could get some blowback. I mean, jihadists aren't the most controllable. They're not the most, restrainable kind of people. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Now, Jolani, what do you guys think about his transformation into a social democrat after? I mean,
Social democrat.
are there videos of him literally chopping somebody's head off? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I know he has very close associates, but I'm not sure if he's actually been videoed. You know what? We would have probably seen that. I shouldn't
Right.
suggest that there is, because
he wasn't the guy with the famous head chopping where they took the 14-year-old Palestinian guy and laid him out in the bed of a truck and put his head over the edge and cut it off. That was
just one of his soldiers.
Yeah, but I wonder if he was involved. The most horrendous thing that they did that I saw. I mean, there was so much that was awful. But when they lured a truck full of children into a into a roadside and stopped it, and then they held out toys and candies and stuff for the kids. The kids came off the bus and they slaughtered the kids. It was about 40 children were killed in such a gruesome way, and it was, I think, the forerunner of I can't keep track of the names. HTS, but Jolani's group. And there's also the story that he that he is actually Mossad agent, and a name gives his Israeli name, but I don't know how to judge that. It's not
right.
I mean, one of the things with the posture that the mainstream media takes is, sourcing has become so difficult as to be mostly unreliable. You can say, well, this looks like a pretty good source, and you can cite it, and you can have somebody like Pepe Escobar come and say he has a contact who said so, but who knows? That's one of their propaganda successes is sowing confusion.
Right, and they're getting ready to change his name again. I saw.
No longer Jolani.
Jolani's name. What?
It'll no longer be Jolani.
Yeah.
Apparently, that just is all that means is that he's from the Golan Heights, I think, is what Jolani means.
Right. Now that they're giving that to Israel, that name doesn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird that ISIS was, I mean, they really relished being as gruesome and brutal. Like, they were proud of it, and they really wanted to shove that down people's throats for some reason. I've always found that suspicious, right? I've always found the brutality suspicious, and how they would, just use these really great cameras, and it seemed like, like lighting, like studio lighting, to just make these great images and videos of these gruesome acts of barbarity, and then they would, show it to us on the evening news, and so everybody in the West knew how barbaric and awful they were. I always found that very suspicious. And I mean, Jolani, of course, was in a U.S. prison in Iraq, and there was, I think, al-Zarqawi was in a U.S. prison too. And so these are like breeding grounds, I think, where the West identifies agents that they can work with and they can promote, and that they can get to do things like we're seeing. And so there is a very deep level of, there's a very deep relationship, and it's who knows where they act autonomously, like where they're given freedom to do whatever, and how much they just have to follow the script that is written for them.
That's true of Israel too. All these TikTok videos brutality towards Palestinians. I think there's a deeper significance to it, which goes back to the psychological apparatus that's been employed for decades, based on, I would say, from what I've read, Walter Lippmann and Edward Bernays, and their employment of Freudian psychology to disrupt and disturb people emotionally. And you see that online too, how people are saying, you know, I just have this feeling of dissociation and things like that. Well, no, duh, because I mean, they're murdering children on camera, and in brutal ways, and bombing hospitals and stuff like that. Of course, any person with any sensitivity, well, you don't even have to qualify it. Just say any person who is brought up as a human being is going to be disturbed in that. When people are disturbed, they're easier to control. You know, what's actually transpiring? I mean, who's giving orders of what to who? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, to drill down there, you know, I think the Zionists, I think they have this tribalism, and I think their tribalism makes them really hate Palestinians and see them as subhuman. And so I think with the Zionist media that we see on social media, where they're dancing and all happy and they're sodomizing, you know, the Palestinian prisoners, I don't know. I think they're kind of embarrassed when we see that. I think that's not for us. And I think that's a little bit different than what ISIS was doing. So I was speaking to, you know, what I think ISIS was doing was really doing that for our benefit. You know, now certainly they're going to have a little bit of tribalism too, because, you know, they've been brought up in these Wahhabist schools that teach that, you know, anybody that's not, you know, like them is an infidel and subhuman. But these guys don't really seem like true believers, some of them. I mean, they don't, you know, I don't think they really understand. They don't read the Quran. I don't think they really are that invested in their religion. It's more of a tribalism. And so that's what made me suspicious. You know, I mean, from you know, their brutality, they seem to do it for us. Whereas when the Zionists do it, they're doing it for themselves. I don't know if that's.
I can't agree with you there, because you cannot misunderstand that TikTok is worldwide. You know, I mean, you can't be that
true.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
We'll agree.
It's not their private group chat.
No, that's true.
That on TikTok, that doesn't stay very private.
Right. That's
anyway.
It reminds me of the WhatsApp discussion that took place right after October 7th. So I think it was October 8th. What the Washington Post labeled a group of 100 billionaires and business titans all joined a WhatsApp discussion, a private WhatsApp discussion, and they started talking for days and weeks and months about what they could do to benefit Israel and to change public opinion in favor of Israel and away from the Palestinians. And there was all kinds of things that were discussed. And even Mayor Adams, New York Mayor Adams, joined the chat, and they told him that, hey, we'll even pay for private security to come in and break up those student protests at Columbia and at NYU. But yeah, those eventually got leaked to the Washington Times, and the Washington Times have never made them public. They did one article. They did one decent article, and that's the one I'm quoting, where they describe it as a WhatsApp of billionaires and business titans. But yeah, so they ought to know that social media is not secure.
Yeah, and what did we learn? They decided on the same plan as we were discussing with the blacks, with the Black Revolutionaries, right? Repression.
Well, we didn't
Against
learn
the
very much at all. We didn't
Well,
learn
we
very
did
much.
know that's what they wanted, right?
Yeah.
Crackdowns,
No, for sure.
criminalization of protests, which has
Yes.
happened. And
Passing these
campuses are a lot quieter this year.
hate laws. That's true. That's true. No, they have such tight control of society, you know, and that's what Lenin kind of pointed out. You know, a constitutional republic, more than any other system, allows them the tightest control possible, because, you know, half the people don't see it as dictatorial. You know, half the people are buying into the whole, oh, it's a liberal democracy. It's not an oligarchy.
It's just an anti-terrorism modification we have here. That the students are all criminalized.
I mean, you know, they don't want to be too overt about that, but they will. If they have to, they will. If they can keep it covert and on the down low, they'd much rather handle things in that way. But ultimately, it's their core interests, which they're going to pursue with impunity, without any regard for, you know, morality or justice. And if they have to be overt about it, they will. And I think we see the mask coming off more and more, you know, with the total support of an outright genocide. You know, they used to tell us they were against genocide. They used to say genocide was bad. And, you know, they don't, you know, I mean, they're engaged in one, they're facilitating one. And so, you know, and they're going to do that. And I mean, they're going to say, well, we don't like it. And we or they're going to say it's not a genocide, but, you know, we can openly see them supporting it. So, you know, as they become under more and more threat, the mask is going to come off more and more. And you know, their need to have a democratic facade is going to be less and less. Patrick, I am so low blood sugar. Do you have any last comments before we wrap up?
I just wanted to go back very quickly to what you said about when society moved from
feudalism.
From feudalism to capitalism and characterize it as progress. I think you could say that there was some economic progress, but I think you also have to keep in mind the reality that for peasants, by and large, they had worked several accommodations with the system so that they didn't have any political freedom. They had no voice at court or anything like that, but they did have some social things which during the transition were taken away from them. You know, their ability to live as independent, low-producing farmers and things, but they were feeding themselves. They were housing themselves within their communities. They had aspects of a decent life, and you could say fairly, well, yeah, so did some slaves have aspects of community life and things like that if they lived on a plantation where they were in community with their friends. So I just wanted to suggest that in any of those things, especially as we transition from one system to another, there's going to be pluses and minuses for it manifest in people's lives.
I agree with that, and I've made that same argument that in certain ways, feudal peasants had it better than a lot of people do today. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Greg, any thoughts before we wrap?
To go off too far into this, but Silvia Federici, are you familiar, Patrick?
What's that?
Do you know Silvia Federici?
Yes, yeah, I read her book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, her theory's kind of like that, right? That capitalism was...
I give credit to a lot of that for my thinking on it.
Yeah. That capitalism was a counter revolution in some ways against the
Yeah,
commons and
yeah, yeah,
power of the
yeah,
peasant.
and the actions they took after the Closure Act, or what was that act called?
Enclosure
Enclosure. Yeah, yeah,
movement.
yeah. That was a really good book.
Mhm.
I should revisit it.
I haven't read the book, but I've been exposed to people that have, and no, it's a persuasive argument for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I,
Patrick and Greg, go ahead.
one final thought is, um, in a future episode, I think it would be really great to talk about some of the uh, actions, reactions, and things that people are characterizing as being warlike, and leading us to war. Red lines and things like that. I think it'd be illuminating to have a discussion along those lines, at least partly.
Can you elaborate a little bit? Because I'm not
Well,
quite.
like, for instance, when Ukraine takes an action like using Western weapons to strike within Russia, Putin has been known to say, well, if you say beforehand, if you do this, you cross a red line with me. And then people say, well, we're on the verge of World War III. But then it happens, and Putin doesn't react. But the question is he just, biding his time to drop an Oreshnik, or or what? I think some discussions along that line. Just a thought.
So, are you good for Tuesday?
Tuesday, same time?
Yeah. Or we can
No,
talk.
actually, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm putting on my tutu and dancing Tai Chi.
Okay. Well, that's
Can't give that up. It keeps me going.
Okay,
But
well, maybe Friday. No, the point is
Friday's usually good. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's a great topic, and yeah, we didn't get to any of those current events. He had a long Q&A, and we could have a good hour-long discussion easy along those lines. So I want to do that. We won't do it Tuesday because you're otherwise occupied, it sounds like. But we'll tentatively schedule for Friday that discussion for sure. And I just want to thank you guys for joining, and all the viewers. So there's been a lot of comments as usual. I can't multitask at all, so I read like one or two of them, and I apologize. But I will read them afterwards. But yeah, we'll see you guys probably Tuesday, if not Tuesday, because it's like the day before Christmas, maybe the following Friday. But thank you, everyone, and we will see you then.
Okay, thank you.